Well, the father of low-cost investing, index investing, has died. Jack Bogle was his name. You'll see him referred to as John Bogle, but most commonly known as Jack Bogle. He was 89 years old. Died of cancer after a lifetime of battling heart disease. He had something like 6 heart attacks during his life and eventually had a heart transplant and continued to work very aggressively to reduce the cost of investing. And I mentioned earlier that at the Warren Buffett AGM, the Berkshire Hathaway AGM, 2 years ago, Jack Bogle was in the audience and Buffett got him to stand up to rapturous applause and then made the joke, of course, that Jack Bogle, who was then 87, would soon be old enough to become an executive director at Berkshire Hathaway, where Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger notoriously, of course, are the old toppies of global investing. He's not quite there yet, but Dr Adrian Saville is chief executive of Cannon Asset Managers, a year or two off the sort of magnificent ages of Bogle and Buffett and Munger yourself, Adrian Saville. But what a guy. I mean, this Jack Bogle revolutionized investing over 20, 30 years.
Thank you, Bruce. Making my way there, slowly but hopefully steadily and surely. By one estimate, he has contributed to wealth in the United States in the order of about $250 billion, which is the fees that he took out of what would have been the expenses paid by ordinary investors. And he was an absolute champion, I think, on two fronts. The first was, as that $250 billion suggests, he was a champion for getting fees as low as possible and getting costs out of investing, but also determined to sort of fight for the small guy, for the individual investor, and to make investing available and accessible to everyone.
And as a result, index investing in the United States is a very substantial part of the overall market. I mean, his basic feeling was most fund managers are simply not worth the fees that they're paid. They don't outperform, and the market statistics year in and year out prove that there and here.
He was an ardent demonstrator of the sort of principle of mean reversion, that it is very hard for active managers to earn their fees. And that very often a period of outperformance will be followed by a period of underperformance, what we call mean reversion. And this is across the industry. So he argued for holding a broad index of bonds, of equities, of property, and in that way became the ambassador for index funds, arguing that the best thing that you could do in a common sense approach is buy a broad, low-cost set of bond funds and index funds. And to go back to your earlier point about age, he said your bond holdings should represent your age, and that as your age goes up, the bond component of your portfolio should nudge up by 1% per year.
And do you believe in that philosophy? Does it make sense to you? It seems like an extraordinarily high percentage of bonds as you get older, especially in a world where longevity is more certain, perhaps than previously. You need to earn more aggressively, perhaps in your 40s and 50s, than the bond market might give you.
Yeah, Bruce, I don't think you should take it as
it's not
a
literal.
hard and fast rule. It's not literally. So, it's a guide that obviously as you head to retirement and you can't tolerate volatility in your portfolio, you should put in something that protects your capital and balances out the volatility of the other asset class. And that, for a young person who's got a long investment horizon, for a distant investment horizon, they should have their portfolio filled with stocks. And along with the principle of getting a low-cost, broad index into your investment portfolio, add as much time as possible. In other words, get going as early as possible. And he put rule 1 of investing as pretty simple: invest, full stop.
It almost doesn't matter where, as long as it's in growth assets. Give me a sense of why it is that index investing has taken off to the extent that it has in the United States, and in South Africa, index investing is but a pinprick on the investing horizon.
Well, you referred to his inception, the Vanguard inception, which is the mid-1970s, and it has steadily grown as an industry or as a way to manage assets from the 1970s to now. Vanguard looks after, I think, in the order of $5 trillion in assets, 20 million customers in 170 countries, including South Africa. And at Cannon, we are invested in part for some of our clients in Vanguard funds as well as other index funds. This is a fantastic way to get diversified low-cost exposure. The principle of mean reversion, to go back to my earlier points, is a good argument for why you want to have at least a healthy chunk of your portfolio in index funds. Buffett argues that for most investors, this is exactly where you should be. Put your money into an index fund, stay there, because you will get the market performance, less these very sort of wafer-thin fees. Whereas if you're in an active portfolio, you're trying to beat the market, it's far more volatile, it is more expensive because of the endeavor of trying to find stocks or positions that are going to deliver the excess return. So active investing is a harder journey. It's more expensive. The way that we at Cannon practice investing from a philosophical perspective is essentially a barbell approach, that you want to have the right amount of investment portfolio in these low-cost index funds, and for the rest, for your surplus capital or discretionary capital, you can put that into sort of adventurous endeavors where you look to do something different or unique to beat the market. And just like the reference to how much should you have in a bond and equity fund really depends on a client-by-client basis, the same will hold as to how much should you have in a passive market matching fund versus what you might be able to afford and put into something more adventurous.
Dr. Adrian Saville, thank you. Chief Executive at Cannon Asset Managers. Tribute to the great Jack Bogle, the guy who popularized index investing, and certainly lots of tributes being paid worldwide to Jack Bogle, who revolutionized the world of investing and really did have a very healthy disregard for the profit gougers of Wall Street.